The Three Kingdoms period is easily one of the most popular eras in Chinese history. Outside of the constant romance of the Three Kingdoms games and Dynasty Warriors titles by Koei Tecmo, there are even more that are released on Steam. Today, we look at the fairly ambitious recently released title with Three Kingdoms Mushouden. Developed by Nanbei Studio, this title looks to combine the Three Kingdoms era with sandbox Bannerlord style gameplay. On paper, this sounds freaking amazing, but is Three Kingdoms Mushouden actually worth a purchase? And just as a disclaimer, I did receive a free code from the developer Nanbei Studio. While I do appreciate the free code, it will not deter me from a fair and honest review. Sounds good? Let's begin. So when you start the game, you can begin a new game as expected. You can also create an officer, but we will get to that later in this review. For now, we have two choices of playing the story mode with Yuangang or picking a character from the sandbox mode. For the sandbox, there are only a handful of characters to choose from. Thankfully, more characters are eventually unlocked when you're finding and recruiting them. For this review, we will mainly focus on the story mode and learn about the mechanics of this game. There's also quite a bit in terms of difficulty options to play with, which is always nice to see. I basically kept everything at default from when I started the game, so those will be the settings that I go with. And now the game has begun properly. The game begins in 182 AD, 2 years before the Yellow Turban Rebellion. As Yuangang, you are speaking with, I believe is your uncle in Yuan Lu. It's hard to tell because the translation issues with this game. People who just met are unrelated call each other brother and bro all the time. Anyways, if you recognize the family name, you are part of the Yuan family, with your father being Yuan Shu. Even though you are technically the heir to Yuan Shu's domain, you decide to make your mark on the world and be your own person. The overall story itself is pretty interesting at first, but ends up being very repetitive by the end. A majority of the story missions involve you going to an area, then getting into combat right after. Despite the sandbox nature of this game, the story is very linear as you go from point A to point B fighting ever increasingly stronger enemies. The story itself would actually be quite short, but you'll most likely spend time in between gathering more officers, getting better equipment, and leveling up. Similar to Bannerlord, you can build up your reputation and fame through completing quests. This is actually the main way to progress through the story, as reaching certain fame levels will unlock more main quests to get the attention of nobles. You'll also get requests that end up paying more and giving more reputation. Even with this progression in place, there are only 3 types of requests you can get: escort, missing person, and eliminating a group of enemies. Despite the repetitive nature of these requests, they often go by pretty quick, especially if you find the quest targets to be very close to the city. Speaking of cities, each location that you visit can have multiple facilities to visit. In order to get more units on the battlefield, you will need to go to the job agency. This is where you can recruit generic officers for a fee and must pay them a weekly wage and feed them food. Each officer represents a unit on the battlefield, meaning that you have multiple named characters fighting alongside each other at once. It's actually quite a cool system early on, as you can see an officer you had for a long time grow with you and become a very strong unit on the battlefield. Historical officers can be found as well, and this varies depending on the mode you are playing. For story mode, certain characters like Changpa and Wenpin join your team when you reach certain cities. Others will need to be recruited by finding out where they live and doing your best to woo them. Once you visit them, you can talk to them, drink with them, spar, give gifts, demand stuff, and ask them to officially join you. This definitely is a callback to the officer-focused Three Kingdom titles, where you can build bonds with officers and convince them to join your group. The layout too also reminds me of those old Japanese Famicom games for some reason. Along with historical officers, you can also interact with historical warlords of the time. Do keep in mind that this game takes huge liberties on where everyone is located, so it is very hard to determine at first where certain characters will be. When you reach enough fame and visit a noble, you can participate in much more challenging missions with much higher rewards. These I find to be a bit more interesting and can even allow you to eventually join a house and rank up within. This provides you with a monthly stipend and some daily food to help feed your officers. It's a fun system, although it doesn't seem like you can actually become a warlord yourself at this time. So all this preparation will finally lead to battle. Each battle usually involves you and your uncle for the story mode, but later battles involve several officers and large armies of units. Regardless of the scale, a majority of your battles will play very similarly. Three Kingdoms Mushouden uses a real-time battle system that plays more like an auto battler. While you can take manual control and press the buttons to use the skills, the game defaults to having the enemy attacked once they are in range of your units. There aren't any bows or ranged weaponry in the game, so your fights will always devolve into chaotic brawls. Thankfully, there is a bit more to it once you reach a certain rank or fame. You'll have the ability to promote one of your men to strategist. Depending on the officer chosen, a strategist can have several skills to deploy within and outside of the battlefield. Some of these battlefield tactics involve launching a volley of arrows at a target, a fire attack, and boosting the damage of all friendly officers within range. They don't necessarily revolutionize the battles in any way, but they do give the players a bit more agency. There's also some strategy beforehand in terms of changing AI behavior of officers and with officer placement to launch ambushes, but nothing that deep. Honestly, the combat is probably the weakest element in the game for me for just how repetitive it all feels. It also doesn't help that it is very hard to tell the strength of the enemy, as you're given a vague estimation on how strong they may be. I wish there was some sort of scouting skill to know exactly what you're up against. From battle, your officers will gain experience and eventually level up. From here, you can assign points to various attributes as well as add a perk. There's actually quite a bit of build variance here, meaning you can make your character a heavily armored long halberd unit or a Geon wielding light armored warrior. There's also quite a bit of weapons and armor to find either out in the wild from defeating enemies or from various markets. As fun as it is building each character, it will end up getting tedious once you have a pretty sizable army. You'll also have to worry about durability of the equipment, which can be fixed at a blacksmith shop or taken care of by materials. There's also another way to find rare equipment and treasures through the discovery of tombs. These are similar to old school text adventure games where you'll have to pick up what to do next. It's pretty simplistic going through these, as you have advanced, explore, rest, and leave as commands to choose from. You'll basically want to get to the end to collect the big rare treasure, which can be sold for a large amount or can be given as a gift. Overall, I like these inclusions as it gives the player a side objective to collect treasure if they so desire. Over time, certain campaign missions will appear once certain dates are reached. These are usually based off of battles in Romance of the Three Kingdoms. The rewards for completing them are pretty high, but they are insanely difficult. The first one is pretty easy as you'll have very powerful officers to assist you in battle, but the others get very difficult with the amount of units you'll have to fight at a time. It also doesn't help that your allies will end up getting defeated, meaning it falls on you to pick up the slack. The idea here is great, but the execution needs some work. There's also one big issue that I realized the more I played, and that is with the world itself. Besides the fact that not all of provinces of China are not represented, as well as several key officers of the time, the world itself is completely static. Regardless of the missions you accomplish for the clans and the requests you accomplish in general, nothing outside of that will change at all. Officers who are with a certain noble clan will not change at all unless you recruit them yourself. You won't even see clans fighting each other or anything like that. Like, you can't even decide to start a clan and take over the other clans. Everything is basically static, which is a huge design flaw if you're going for a Mount and Blade experience. Maybe a future update could add a start after the Yellow Turbans, or just have the warlords engage in a skirmish or two. And as I mentioned prior, there is a character creator to play around with. These custom officers can not only be played as by you in the sandbox mode, but they can also be found in the same way as historical officers are. At launch, there weren't too many options to customize your character, but that has since improved greatly. You can customize what attributes, ultimate skills, and stratagems that they have. There's also quite a bit of options in terms of appearance, which is much appreciated. It reminds me of the Sands of Salazar in the way the character creator is handled here. Considering that this is a lower budget title, I am happy to report that I have had 0 crashes during my 35 hours of playtime. There were, however, some points of slowdown, especially when my highlighted character would perform their ultra move. Not sure what causes this, but it still seems to be an issue despite the many updates released since launch. And I should mention that there has been quite a bit of post-launch support. There have been several updates released to better optimize the game and address some of the minor bugs that people have ran across. While I definitely do appreciate the support, I would like to see a more dynamic world taking place. Even though it is before the Yellow Turban Rebellion, it would be interesting seeing some warlords grow at it so you can join in on these battles. For example, it would be interesting to see the Yuan Shao battle it out with the Tao clan well before their eventual clash at Guandu. Overall, Three Kingdoms Mushouden is ultimately an ambitious title that doesn't necessarily reach its potential, but definitely has some strong moments. For the positives, the freedom to explore and recruit historical officers is fun, there's quite a bit of character build diversity, and collecting rare equipment is quite enjoyable. Unfortunately, it suffers from a repetitive battle system, repetitive quests, and a lack of late game variety. Thankfully, non-based studios have released several updates that have addressed some of the quality of life upgrades and even added an additional character to use in the sandbox mode. Making a game with this level of freedom and ambition is always to be commended, but it doesn't make Three Kingdoms Mushouden an amazing title. My recommendation would be to wishlist this game and get it on sale. Currently, the game goes for $25 full price, which isn't a terrible price, but not a great one either. $20 is much more reasonable price given the quality of the combat system and the repetitive mid to late game missions. Still, I will keep my eye on this one to see if the post-launch support continues going forward. Thank you all for watching as always, and this is Powerhouse, signing off.